In this tutorial, we're going to look at creating a dialog from scratch. You'll require Platformer Pro version 2.0.5 or above. We're going to start with level 1.1 of the alien sample. I'm just going to save that as a new scene called Dialog Tutorial. And what we're going to do in this scene is we're going to unpack completely the UI prefab from the alien sample. We're going to delete the dialog system so we can rebuild it again. Given our game window is so small, I might just slightly tweak the UI as well. Right, so now we have an empty scene, a Platformer Pro scene with a character, an item manager, and most of the standard components, but we don't have anything to do with dialogues in here. So in the UI canvas, we're going to create an empty child and call it dialog system. We're going to create a placeholder to hold the visible part of the system. And let's just expand both of these components to fill up all of the available UI real estate. Now we need something to hold the UI components related to the character. So we'll call that character content. And inside that we need three things. Some kind of background. We need something to show the character's portrait. And we need something to show the character's actual dialogue. Let's add image components to the images and a text component to the text. We'll just clean up some of the formatting here. So let's stretch this along the bottom of the screen. And let's stretch this to fill all of the available space. We'll pick some kind of image that looks like it'll work for a background. And we'll stretch it out. That fills most of the space. For the portrait, let's just change this to one of the character images. It doesn't really matter which one we use. That one will do. Fix up the size a little bit. It's probably a bit too small. It's not too bad. And let's reposition this on the left. And maybe a little bit higher. That'll do for our sample. And then finally, put some sample text in here. We'll use the squares font because it matches the rest of the level. We'll change the color to black. I think we can just expand this one out as well and give it some margins. Maybe just a little bit more. And let's move it down a little bit. So that looks pretty good. Now for when the enemy speaks, we can basically just duplicate this and rename some objects. And let's, instead of putting it at the bottom, we'll put that one at the top. Maybe just a little bit further down. That will do for now. Now we can change the portrait in the dialog system itself, but just for easy identification, let's pick one of the other aliens And there's one more thing we need to create. So I'm just going to duplicate the character content again, and this time I'm going to call it character option content. And this is where we display the different options that the character can pick from if the dialogue has choices. So usually what we'll do here is we'll create a vertical layout group. It could be a horizontal layout group. And inside of that, we'll create game objects that have text components attached. So we just add some text components here. Let's maybe put these on the right hand side of the screen. We'll set the font, set a color. For this component in the layout group, we'll change this to upper right. Put some text in here just so we can see what's going on. So obviously the spacing there is a little bit large, so let's do something like maybe that. And let's just indent this a little bit on the right. Probably still a little bit too big. And we'll get there eventually. I think that's good enough for our simple sample. Let's get rid of, actually, no, we can leave that there. So that's kind of all the visual components that we need. Maybe just one small thing is let's just add some background here just to black out the rest of the scene when the dialogue starts. So now we have to connect all of these things to the dialogue system. So let's add a dialogue system component, drag the visible content to the visible content box, drag the character content, character text, character portrait, the other content, the other text, the other portrait, the options text parent, which is the object that has the text boxes under it, as well as the content. Just here you'll notice that it has some options for when you're showing options you can set the color. So let's make sure the text is black unless it's selected, in which case maybe we'll use like a red color. So our dialogue's mostly constructed. Let's just tick show dialogue on startup, so it shows straight away. And of course we need to actually build our dialogue. We don't have a dialogue graph yet. So I'm just going to click over here, create dialogue graph, and rename it, we'll just call it sample dialogue. That brings up this dialogue editor where we can start adding dialogue components. So let's start with a dialogue entry. So all dialogues start with an entry. That's just to tell it the system where we're going to start from. And the most basic part of a dialogue is a dialogue step. So basically a dialogue step is just a piece of text. Let's say blue is the best. And we can either tick the box to mean, which means the character will say it, or untick the box, which means the other, which is typically the enemy or the other character will say. And then we'll just draw a connection by clicking and dragging from the exit node here to the entry node here, which basically means we'll start here and then we'll follow this along. So let's add another dialogue step, and maybe we'll say the character will say, and there we have a very simple dialogue. Let's hit play and see what happens. Oh, one more thing, we just need to make sure that this dialogue is the default dialogue. Now when you trigger a dialogue, you can choose which dialogue graph to use. So you can use the same UI to display many different dialogues, but in our simple sample, we're just going to pull this across as the default and tick this show on startup, which should mean that we get a dialogue system popping up. So blue says blue is the best, and then the pink says I'm not so sure, and then the dialogue ends. So the dialogue will always end if it hits an exit node with no arrows coming out of it. So let's add some options. So what we're going to do is, instead of doing dialogue step, we'll choose dialogue option. We just need to add a few options. So let's take the same character text, put dot dot dot, and then we'll say blue is the best. And actually, we'll add another option that says I think pink is best. And we'll clear the exit here, and instead of going to that dialog step, we'll go to this option. And then when you select the option, let's say, if you say blue is the best, we'll say correct, but it's not the character saying that. So we can just right click and clone here. Oops, not copy, I want to duplicate. And we'll say wrong, and drag from that option. So we need to make this the character speaking. So the blue alien says blue is the best, and then the character says I'm not so sure, and gives it some options. Let's fix my typo. And then depending on the option picked, we get a different outcome. Okay, and let's just add one more thing where we'll actually add an event response. So if you select correct, let's say you complete the level. So when you exit this correct, it runs this event, and the event is level complete. Give that a save, hit play. So blue is the best. I'm not so sure, says the alien, and now we can use up and down to move between the two options. We do notice that we don't have enough room in our options to display. So let's just increase that width there. And if we say I think pink is the best, it says wrong. We can play on. Let's hit play again, but this time we'll choose the other option. Blue is the best. Actually, blue is the best. Correct. And we exit the level, and we'll notice that level 1 is cleared. So this is just a brief introduction to the dialogue system. There's a lot of other things you can do in there as well. You've also got some options for how you configure the different bits and pieces. So one thing to note, for example, is if you want the character portraits to stay visible all the time, you could, for example, just drag this portrait. Pull it down would make more sense. Let me that up and do the same with maybe the character portrait, and then we could go in the dialogue system, we could clear these items, actually no, we don't even need to do that, it'll be fine as it is. So now that'll show the portrait all the time. So if we hit play now, when one character's talking, you'll still be able to see who they're talking to. Another simple thing we could do is, let's imagine we didn't want to talk to the blue alien, but we're actually talking to a different alien. We could, for example, go update portrait, do it on the first event, and choose a different sprite. So let's say, the sizing is probably not going to be perfect for this, but this will show the general idea. And if we hit play, you should see the alien portrait is now, the beige alien portrait is now used, and so on. Thanks for watching.